Hello and welcome back to another episode of Q&A where I answer questions in the comments section of my last video. Today I'm responding to 8 different comments or 7 different comments with a shout out to an 8th. And I'd like to thank you guys for commenting on the last video. Definitely leave comments on this video as well with questions about fantasy hockey or just hockey in general. One of these questions isn't fantasy related, but I thought I'd dive into it because it seemed like fun. Thank you for subscribing. If you subscribed lately, I'm at 508, so as you can see down in the left, I need to update that picture. Consider subscribing if you have not yet. But without further ado, let's get into the first question here. And actually, before I get into that, gotta shout out the Jersey, Maine University. That's where I study at the moment. But Leonidas asks, are there any teams playing better than their record? And I think I have 3 teams that are playing better than their records, in my opinion, early on. And one thing I do have to say, it's a pretty small sample size so far, even with some of these teams that played 9 games, some have played 16. Some of them are ranked. Most teams, especially with how the divisions are playing only in the division, are ranked fairly appropriately based on their record. But there are 3 teams that I think you can make an argument are playing better than their record. So the first one I go into is the Anaheim Ducks. Now, the Ducks have picked up regulation wins over Vegas and the Avalanche, which are, you're playing a team 8 times, you're going to do that, but they have picked up 2 of these wins early on within their first 15 games they have these wins. They played 8 games versus the big 3 teams in the division, being Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado. Come out with 6 points out of the possible 16 to get, which isn't great, but you're almost getting 50% of your points there against the big teams. So I think that's notable. One thing you got to point out when talking about the Ducks is their lack of elite scoring. If you look at Maxime Comtois, Hampus Lindholm, Rickard Rakell, Getzlaf, Carter Rowney, they're all in that 8 to 6 range right there. And that's what the Ducks need this year, because they're not going to have a guy be a point per game. They're probably not going to have a guy come that close to a point per game. But when you look at John Gibson and what he's been doing in the net for the Ducks so far this year, you're thinking maybe they can slip in to the playoffs. Because you look, it's a 3-team division with Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado. The team that's playing for the 4th spot is most likely going to get bounced in the first round. It is NHL, though, so you never know who can get hot and take out a team. But it looks like it's definitely probably going to come down to Minnesota, Arizona, and Anaheim. It just doesn't seem like it's there for San Jose anymore, which is kind of sad considering Erik Karlsson signed his soul over there. You got the LA Kings, which, they just let up too many goals. They're not getting consistent goaltending. They are scoring more this year, though. But I don't have faith in their defense or just their team in general. And then you got the Ducks, who out of those bottom 3 teams, I just think has the most potential because of their goaltending with how good John Gibson is. To the point, I'm going to say the Ducks, with the team effort they've been putting in every night, with the few decent results they've had, they're probably the team that's playing better of the teams in this division. We then move on to the next team, I'd say the New Jersey Devils. They are 4-3-2, so above 500, and I think people are sleeping on them a little, one, because they haven't played as many games as a lot of the other teams in this division, but it's another team like Anaheim where you have a good effort level by all the players throughout the lineup here and a very good young goaltender, Mackenzie Blackwood, and that may just be enough for the Devils to make some noise and potentially, I'm not going to call this, but they have a shot to sneak into the playoffs, especially with the emergence of Jack Hughes, 8 points in 9 games. Ty Smith, the young defender, has looked good so far. Miles Wood wreaked havoc over the Bruins in the first 2 games of the season. They just have a lot of good role players, too, like Andreas Janssen. Kyle Palmieri's there. You got PK Subban, who is still capable, not what he used to be. But there's a decent amount of good pieces here to the point where if they're coached the right way, if they put in the right effort level and play the right way, it's not unthinkable to think the New Jersey Devils can sneak into the playoffs. It is the NHL, I have to remind people. These teams can sneak into the playoffs even if they don't have the name brand value on their lines. It's just a weird league, and, New Jersey Devils can make some noise in my opinion. Then we go to the Canadian division. I'd have to say the Flames. I think when you look top to bottom, the Flames have a very complete roster here. And they're 7-6-1, but if you look at the results on a result-to-result basis, they never really get blown out. They're always in every game for the most part, and they get results. They just really do. They got Jake Markstrom, who came over from Vancouver. Good save percentage, good goals against average. If they can get David Rittich to play at a higher level and relieve Markstrom from some of the workload, it would really do wonders for the Flames. And as you can see with Markstrom in net, they're 7-4-1, which is very good. I don't think me saying the Flames are good is surprising. It's just, you look at their record, they're 7-6-1. It's nothing special. Edmonton and Winnipeg are above them. But the Flames have potential to finish anywhere from where they are right now in the division at 5th as high as number 2. So let's get into the fantasy talk. And the first question about fantasy is from Eric Ohlendorf. He wants my thoughts on Victor Olofsson. If you saw my videos going into the season, I was very heavy on drafting Olofsson. He was going around the 120th mark, and I was thinking he should more go so in the 75 to 100 range, just because if you watch this guy play last year, very elite shot, and there was a possibility that he was going to be playing on Eichel's wing, and so far he's been bouncing around a little bit in the lineup, but with his scoring ability, it looks like he may just stick with Eichel. Also, you have to acknowledge the first power play unit. He's on it. He's in a gunner position. They look for him. He snipes. This guy's just a pure goal scorer. I believe he has 10 points in 10 games, 4 goals, and Victor Olofsson has potential to finish in the top 50 once things are said and done. And, at a winger's position, too, a left wing, it's a little more valuable than that production as center due to the lack of wingers compared to centermen, or elite centermen, I should say. And it's really hard to compare him right now for the pure fact that the Sabres have played less games than most teams in the league, but I'm still pretty high on Victor Olofsson. We then go into some Flyers talk here. Brendan Lynch wanted my thoughts on Travis Konechny, and I think Travis Konechny's fine. Konechny right now has 8 points in 12 games. You want to be a little closer to a point per game, but he's not that far off the mark, and it's still pretty early in the season. He's playing with Claude Giroux. Couturier will probably take that spot back from Hayes when he gets put back in the lineup. And that was another question I got asked, and I got that asked by Ryan Brown, and I'll be getting to some of his questions later. And that is, how will Couturier impact the Flyers' fantasy prospects or fantasy players when he gets reintroduced in the lineup? And I think all it really does is probably bumps Nolan Patrick to the third line, or maybe Kevin Hayes to the third line. I think they'll leave Kevin Hayes up there. I'd suspect the third lines will be JVR, Nolan Patrick, and Joel Farabee. And then you'll have the first line be Giroux, Couturier, Konechny. Second line, Lindblom, Hayes, and Voracek. But that's a luxury the Flyers have with their elite talent on offense. They can really juggle these lines however they want, and all of these guys should produce. So I think Couturier is just a gain for most of the Flyers, except for maybe Nolan Patrick if he gets bumped down to the third line. But even if he's playing with JVR, who's been outstanding, and Joel Farabee. So I don't think it negatively impacts anyone really on the Flyers. I think it only is a net positive for the team just because of the defensive ability that Couturier brings to the table and the effort he brings night to night. The Flyers just get better around him. So it's positive for everyone, and if you're a Couturier owner especially. We then move on to another question, which is from Little Snipe. Thoughts on Kevin Fiala and Teuvo Teravainen now? When it comes to Fiala, you look at 3 goals in 8 games, but then you look, each of those goals come in the last 4 games he has played, 1 in each, so that's pretty good as of late. He then got suspended for the hit on Matt Roy, which not good. But the thing is, I'm not really sure how to feel about Fiala. He's been inconsistent so far. Really bad start, then gets good, then gets suspended. So it's kind of hard. If you're a Fiala, if you own Fiala and you've sat on him this long, you should hold him. If you're someone who's thinking of picking him up for free agency, if someone's dropped him, I'd give it a game or 2, maybe 3, see how he does. No reason to pick him up right now. I'm not really sure he's going to replicate what he did last year. It doesn't look like he's going to do that. He doesn't have a single assist through 8 games so far. As for Teuvo Teravainen, I think Teuvo Teravainen will be just fine. Just had a really slow start this season. Sorry about turning the page here in my notes. He's on the top line with Sebastian Aho. He's on the top power play with Aho and Svechnikov and Dougie Hamilton. He started with 7 straight games without a point. Then he has a goal already tonight. I don't know if he's improved upon that yet, but tonight he has a goal. He had a goal in the game before. And, some postponements mixed in, which really creates a weird dynamic of, if you got a guy on a hot streak, can he continue it when he has postponements? So I wouldn't be too worried about Teuvo. Fiala, I'd be a little more worried about, but I don't think Fiala is worth dropping. If you sat on him this long, you might as well see what he's going to give you, because obviously you're probably in a deeper league where you can't just pick someone up who gives you good production. We then move on to the next question, which is from Donald Pump. Thoughts on Cody Glass? Daily Faceoff has him playing third line, top power play, but they're saying he's going to get a shot soon on the top line over Stevenson. Would you drop a guy like Larkin for Glass? Thanks, Patty. No problem, Donald. And let's first talk about Cody Glass. Seems like he's going to be a pretty good player in this league, pretty good scorer. He is playing on the first power play with Stone, Carlson, Pacioretty, and Pietrangelo. You look at the game log recently, you like what you see from a young player there. But one thing you brought up is Stevenson. I think they like Stevenson on that first line. I don't think he's going to lose that job. He's been good production-wise. That brings me to the next slide, which is talking about Larkin. You look, Stevenson down here, 9 points in 13 games, solid production. Seems like a good player who can hang himself. You then look at Glass with 7 and 9, which both are ownable. But then you got to talk about Dylan Larkin here. And the thing that you got to note with Larkin is Tyler Bertuzzi has been out since January 30th. And you look at Dylan Larkin's game log without Bertuzzi, 2 points in about 7 games, 8 games right there. So really the timetable on Bertuzzi is not really too known right now. But when Bertuzzi comes back, I think I'd rather have Larkin over Glass, just for the pure fact I don't think Glass is going to take that first line role. I think they like him on the third line with Alex Tuch. I think they like the balanced scoring it brings. I just don't see a reason for that move to happen. And Dylan Larkin is probably going to be more consistent than Cody Glass when Bertuzzi comes back. Short term, Glass will probably outperform Larkin without Bertuzzi being in. But I think long term, Larkin's the play. We then move into Ryan Brown, who usually asks a decent amount of questions. I'm going to address all of them. I already addressed Couturier, but I'm going to be quick. First one is Justin Falk is heating up. And yes, he had that 3-point game against the Coyotes. Fun fact, the Blues' last 7 games have all been against the Coyotes. But the thing is, I need to see more to be confident. I think he's worth a roster spot, no doubt about that. But I'm not ready to think Justin Falk is going to keep this up just because Torrey Krug's there, Vince Dunn's there. They can shuffle the power play units up anytime they want. Justin Falk is listed on the first power play right now. He might not be in the next game or the game after that. 6 points in the last 8 games. That's inflated by that 3-point game he had, though. I just need to see more before I can be confident Justin Falk's going to be a good point producer consistently, but worth a roster spot nonetheless. He then asked about Darnell Nurse. I don't think he's going to keep up his point pace just because it's very goal dependent. I was looking at his shot percentage. It's up like 13% from his career high, or like 11%. I just don't think that's going to be sustainable. Maybe I'm wrong, and he just ride the wave if you have him, of course. I know he gets some hits. I know he's a pretty good defenseman himself, comparatively speaking to his teammates in Edmonton. I just don't see him keeping up that goal pace, and I don't see him keeping up that point total or point per game pace either. So I'm not too high on him. Worth the roster spot, though. You then asked about Nugent Hopkins falling off. I don't really think so. He's playing with McDavid on the first line, so even if he's going to fall off a little bit from last year, it's probably not going to be that much of a fall off. 11 points in 16 games, still solid. Worth the roster spot if you're playing with McDavid and you've done what Nugent Hopkins done. No worry about him at all. Tom Wilson as an option, yes, 100%. 12 points in 11 games. Tom Wilson on that first line just produces, gets you hits. He does everything. Tom Wilson, definitely an option. James Reimer, no. Once Mrazek gets back to starting all the games down there, it's not Reimer's job, and he's not worth owning. You can stream him here and there. You look at his stats, though, he's been pretty bad in general, despite the 6-1 record. So I guess if you're in a league that really depends on wins, ride him while he starts, but it's not his job when Mrazek plays, and Reimer has not been that good in general. We then move on to the last topic, which was from Michael Luca Tizio. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What do you think of this? I acquired Vasilevskiy&Barkov for Point&Varlomov, and I think you do that trade. I think you get the best goalie in the league and in fantasy hockey, which is Andrei Vasilevskiy, who's been 9-2-1 record so far this year, 933 save percentage, 1.92 goals against, has started 12 of the Lightning's 13 games. He's a horse, and he's probably on pace to win the Vezina this year so far. You then look at the other side, but you got Semyon Varlamov, who's had a good year so far too. No doubt about that. Ilya Sorokin has not really put any doubt in Semyon Varlamov starting every game. Hasn't played good, Sorokin, that is. So Varlamov has been good, but then you got to look at the other side of the trade. Barkov compared to Point. 12 points in 12 games for Barkov, 16 and 13 for Braden Point. Braden Point will probably score more goals. Barkov should be right there with him in the points race, though. So I think you're really getting a like-for-like swap at forward for the most part, and then you're getting a very big upgrade at goalie. With a guy in Vasilevskiy who was going in the top 20 of every draft, and then you got Point and Barkov, who were probably both going around anywhere from 15 to 40, and then you have Semyon Varlamov, who was a mid-round goalie. So I think you're getting the better end of the deal in most aspects if you would take that deal. So I definitely recommend it. I'd like to thank you for watching the video, and I would like to point out a comment from Bryce Talks. It's tough right now with COVID. The teams in my league that are at the top are all Canadian player heavy. The cancellations are discouraging because in a head-to-head league, postponements don't help. Missing 13 starts this week, and the league limits transactions to 2 weekly. This season, more than anything, is purely luck-based, and it makes managing a team almost impossible. Any tips on dealing with COVID, losing all your assets? It's just what it is this year, man, and it's tough to be in a league that limits transactions to 2 weekly. Maybe start a petition in your league to get more transactions, because that is very strict in a time like this. So that's the first thing I recommend. As for just day-to-day management, there's not really much you can do. You can't really warrant dropping some of these players who go with postponements. All you can really think about is you're going to have a player who probably has a loaded schedule in the more important weeks later on in the season. So like someone on, let's say Dallas or Carolina who's had a decent amount of games postponed, or Buffalo, you're just going to get more games from Eichel possibly in the playoff weeks, which could be beneficial in the long run. As for the short term, it does make day-to-day managing a pain, and it can cause you to lose some matchups. I lost the matchup the last week because I was just ravaged with injuries and postponements, but it just is what it is for the most part, and there's not really much you can do besides maybe try to pick up some players who are going to have games, more games later on in the season because of the postponements. But besides that, you just got to hope and pray that your team survives another day and that it doesn't hurt you too much during the regular season of fantasy. Thanks as always for watching. If you want to subscribe to the video, consider hitting the subscribe button, like the video, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment down below with questions for the next video, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. Enjoy the hockey.